And welcome to the Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, rejoined as every week by Mick Gillispie and Kevin Reichard. Mick, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. Just kind of watching the way that the sports world is moving along right now. Very interesting. A lot of news today. So it's going to be an interesting week, I think, is very well undersaid.
Kevin Reichard, how are you?
I am overwhelmed by all the news Mick just referenced. Been posting a lot of stories. It's crazy between the football stuff and Major League Baseball working so hard to get the season going, and the Cardinals. It's just a volatile mess right now.
Shall we start in Knoxville?
Let's start in Knoxville.
Because news with the Tennessee Smokies.
Yeah, Mick, we've talked about this privately before. I see Randy Boyd finally went public with his ballpark plan.
Yeah, it looks like that he's put together a really good plan. I hope that for his sake and for the team's sake and fans' sake that it happens. I guess this is like the first step in the process of getting a downtown ballpark. But he owns a lot of the property. He's a lifelong fan of the team. He's a big baseball fan. And he's a big fan of Knoxville. He's the president at the University of Tennessee. He's always wanted a facility that the Vols could use along with the Smokies, so maybe that's something that could happen in the future. It's the first time I've actually seen a rendering of this potential ballpark, and it looked really cool. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I wrote it up. I'd been tipped off by the Knoxville News reporter that this was coming along. This story, and obviously I'm not quoted, but I'm referenced in it anyway. It's a cool looking design. One thing I didn't put in the story, and Mick, you may be able to better address this. So it's about 5 blocks from the old Bill Meyer Stadium location?
Yeah, it's not far from Bill Meyer, but it's just in a better spot to have a stadium because there are a lot of restaurants and bars, and you could walk from Old City to, Gay Street, which has a lot of really cool, places to hang out. And then not far from, the University of Tennessee, so that's a really good area in Knoxville to put a stadium. And you're not far from the river either.
Cool. Yeah, it looks really nice. The industry could use a little bit of good news with ballpark development because, some projects have kind of ground to a halt. Others have never really taken off. There's a few other proposals being worked on out there that I don't want to go into right now because I was sort of sworn to secrecy, and I know it's my job not to necessarily be secret, but sometimes you got to let the process unwind before you go public. So the projects are out there, but right now, precious little out on the pro front past 2021. You're going to see a whole bunch of stuff open next year. Then after that, you may have a year when you don't see anything new happen.
Mystery.
It's not nearly as intriguing as you would think. People don't realize what a hard slog it is to get a ballpark built. And, that's why I wanted to reference and make sure that people understood that Randy's been working on this plan for a long time. This is not something he's thrown out. He acquired the land, 4 years ago already? Something like that?
Yes. Well, he's been picking up pieces of it, off and on for a while. And he's had restaurants down there. I think he did buy that piece of property 4 years ago, maybe. But he owns, a bunch of bars and restaurants that are in that same area. So, you put all that stuff together, and it's going to be a great fit.
Okay, from the plans in Knoxville, how about the upgrades as baseball returns to Buffalo for the first time since the 19th century?
The poor Buffalo fans won't get to see the inside of their ballpark now that it's been whipped into semi-MLB shape by the Blue Jays. We posted some pictures of the paint, and it's paint mainly, but that's cool. A lot of Blue Jay blue in the concourses and in the batting cages and in the clubhouses. New lights or upgraded lights, new turf. and some of that the fans will be able to enjoy next week when Major League Baseball goes back to Toronto and the Bisons set up shop again. But what was it, 105 years since Major League Baseball has been played in Buffalo? I think that's just tremendous. And it was an outlaw league, which is even better story.
They didn't have great lights back then either.
No one in the Federal League was playing under lights. Although the Federal League gave us, speaking of lights at ballparks, gave us Wrigley Field, the last MLB ballpark to put in lights.
Was it pronounced Wiegman?
It was Wiegman Park. And Charlie Wiegman, who was well known as a restaurateur slash, I don't know if you quite go to the point of saying good fella, but he was a connected fella who loved baseball. And, I tried to buy the St. Louis Cardinals at the time, did not, and ultimately launched this league along with other cohorts. That died, and he was allowed to buy into the Cubs.
The Chicago Whales originally playing.
Yes. Well, they didn't start out with team names their first year. They were the Shy Feds, according to the newspapers, and they weren't the only one. There were other Federal League teams that didn't adopt a formal nickname. And I think Wiegman, who, as a owner of little cafeterias, realized branding was important. So that then they became the Whales, the mighty Whales of Chicago. And then you segued into Wrigley and the Cubs, and that ballpark was a huge upgrade for the Cubs and really made the Cubs what they are today.
So both of you talked about when we first started this, just how many stories there are. So I'm thinking about Knoxville and I'm thinking about Buffalo as, hey, here's what's going on in minor league baseball and Major League Baseball. Mick, what's something big on your radar?
Well, I mean, first off, obviously, having been the broadcaster for so many years in Tennessee, that seeing that stadium story come out, I don't want to say that I wasn't expecting it, but, I'm not in the loop. I mean, and a lot of us aren't. I mean, you just kind of, you hear bits and pieces of it. There are definitely people that want to keep the team in Sevierville, and then there's I'd say the overwhelming majority that would like to see it back in Knoxville. And the good thing is no matter where it is, it'll still be close enough for people to come and go to games there. But when I saw it today with my own two eyes, there was a bit of excitement because I thought, wow, this is like a visual, like it's more than just an idea or a story in the newspaper. Now I have a picture of it, so I was excited about that. And I'm curious to see what happens with the trade deadline in Major League Baseball and the Cubs as well. They've been off. The Cardinals are having problems with COVID. I like the way that MLB's handling this, and I know it's a little bit strange to have, these, like teams that haven't played that many games because of COVID, but, you recover from it and then you play when that time's come. This is the compromise that we have to play baseball, and I'm fine with that, I'm not a fan of 7-inning doubleheaders, just kind of along the same lines. But I've kind of softened my opinion a little bit because I'm seeing now that teams like the Marlins are going to have to make up a lot of games. And I don't think a 7-inning game is a 9-inning game. I don't think the team, in my opinion, the team that is the inferior team has a better chance to win a 7-inning game than a 9-inning game, because normally you're inferior because you're pitching, so you can kind of trick a team if you can eliminate those 2 innings. And so we saw the Marlins actually do that, because I don't think they're that good, but they started off 7-1. So, but at the same time, that's the compromise that we have to have right now to get these games in, So, I'm not saying I still don't like a 7-inning doubleheader, but I like that we're playing baseball. And then, out of the baseball world, I'm a little bit disappointed in college football. I mean, I work in college football. I'm ready to get back to work. I want to see these kids play. I want to go back to work and talk about college football. And I'm so confused on what is fact and what is reality when it comes to COVID anymore. I'm tired of the politics. I feel like I'm being drugged one way from one group and one way from the other. Everyone's just in there trying to in my opinion, they're trying to do whatever is best to help win an election in November. And it's hard for me to get a real read on how severe something is or not, you know. And other than we haven't, you know, I haven't worked since March, so and I'm pretty sure that I had COVID already. I'm just going to say that, and I think that I had it in spring training because and didn't know it, and I don't think anyone knew it because we just didn't know back then. But I got sick and I had like some problems breathing, and then you know, just what I have other reasons to think that. So and I didn't die, you know. And then other people I know that I couldn't say at the beginning of this that I knew anyone with it. Now I know a lot of people have had it. And for the most part, it can be a pain in the ass. I'll say that it lingers, but no one's died from it, you know. But if you're older, then you probably should stay inside, you know, because it from what I'm seeing, it'll stick around for a long time. With that said, at some point, and I think that point is now, we know enough information where we can, if you know that you have a health problem, you should stay inside, and you can wear a mask when you get out in public. But I really feel like we got to get back to work. I mean, I'm seeing all these people getting laid off, and that was been my concern. And you guys know, I said at the beginning of this that I was more concerned over seeing people lose their jobs and not have money to survive than I was COVID. It wasn't that I wasn't into COVID. I grew up poor. I know the dangers of that, and now I'm kind of seeing that start to affect a lot of people. Especially in the sports business, because a lot of us haven't worked in a long time.
It's interesting that one of the responses to college football conferences talking about not holding seasons or pushing seasons back to spring is the potential unionization of all of the football players.
I think that's sort of an idle threat because at the end of the day, the NFL doesn't want these college players, and there's no place for them to go. So the NCAA still has tremendous power in determining the future of the sport. You know, they can threaten all they want, but like the number 1 draft pick this year in the NFL draft wouldn't have been a first round draft pick a year ago. Let's put it that way. And so I think they might be overestimating the power a little bit. And I think there's room for college football to be reformed and to make it more player friendly. I'm with Mick. I just don't know what to think right now about what's going on in college football. I think there's been a lot of bad Twitter postings from people you expect to know what's going on who really don't. And so, you know, this mythical Big Ten vote yesterday to cancel the season. Apparently there never was a vote. But
wow.
One person tweets it, and then all of a sudden 20 others do, and then it becomes an acceptable.
Wasn't it Dan Patrick who reported that he had heard something about this?
Dan Patrick was one of the ones who amplified the story. It had been also reported in a few other outlets, including, I believe, the Free Press as well. But apparently there was no vote. And then another meeting in the ACC that was pumped as you know, they could be ending their season. It was a meeting of athletic directors who don't have the power to call off a season. This is the stuff that happens on a much higher level than the athletic directors. So, you know, I understand the concerns. I think ESPN did a really great story that people are kind of ignoring on a spike in heart conditions among NCAA athletes. Very rare heart condition that like 5 or 6 Big Ten athletes have been diagnosed with.
At least 5, yes.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing you don't come up, you can't detect it just from a screen test or anything. It's something you got to really look for to find.
Same thing with Eduardo Rodriguez with the Red Sox, right? The exact same thing.
The same thing. And if you've got a spike like that, you got to stop and say, well, you know, let's explore this more. And maybe, and you could actually eliminate COVID as a cause of it. So I think calling the season right now is I'm with Mick. It's a little early. And if they do, they should put every protocol in place to make sure that players can play in the spring. But we're also finding out that a lot of schools aren't even been honest with us about the number of COVID cases at their universities.
Was that a story that came out of Colorado State? That the Colorado State players were saying, we think that they're covering up the stories of us telling our symptoms?
Well, it also came out of Jim Harbaugh's big letter imploring everyone to want to play ball, and then he sort of, in the end, in that letter, sort of squeezed in there that they have had cases at the University of Michigan, which the school has not acknowledged in the past. So, you know, these are such uncharted waters, and everything's been politicized. In a way, I wish President Trump hadn't weighed in, and I wish this hadn't been a political issue, because I think you could have had the season, but schools would have needed to really crack down on players and created bubbles, and they didn't want to do that.
And we are seeing right now the bubbles so far are working for NHL, NBA, NWSL, lacrosse, etc.
That's why we'll see an NFL season. I'm convinced of it. But it's such a day-to-day thing. And probably, Mick, in the last 5 minutes we've been talking, there's probably been 20 Twitter updates as to the status of the season and whether it's happening or not.
Okay,
I know.
But also, how many people, as Mick has said, Mick lost his job. So many people have lost their jobs. So we've got the health crisis that is ravaging our country and the world. And because it has not been dealt with, because it has not adequately been dealt with, people are going to continually lose their jobs in sports, in college programs, with teams, in so many different areas.
Yeah, I mean, University of Wisconsin estimates that closing down college football will cost the program $100 million. They're in a unique position in a way they're structured, because they're standalone and actually funnel money back into the university. It's not a subsidized program. But University of Minnesota, they were saying $75 million that they'll lose in revenue. And that subsidizes a lot of sports in both schools. So there'll be definite ripple effects. And administrators, broadcasters, you know, I just received a couple emails this morning from people who had been laid off, and it just breaks my heart.
I wonder if we could go into just to segment minor league baseball. I wonder if there's a way that we could count how many people in minor league baseball have lost their jobs, divided by the total minor league baseball jobs that are out there, just to understand how catastrophic this has been.
Yeah, it would be interesting to sit down and figure that out, because the layoffs have been coming for months now. You know, I remember the first layoffs. You know, Memphis was one of the first to do a mass layoff, and everyone was saying, well, maybe that's too dramatic. And now Peter Freund looks like the smartest guy in the room because he acted on it quickly. But the layoffs, and I don't want to speak specifically because I want to sort of honor their privacy. The ones today in one specific team surprised me because they were known, and it's a AAA team known for running a pretty lean operation. We're not talking about, you know, a couple hundred people in the front office. We're talking about a pretty lean front office to begin with. And they didn't announce, they just had layoffs today. And when you see it go, you're hitting bone now, is what I'm saying.
I mean, minor league baseball is by and large smaller run operations for smaller budget, as compared to, Mick, as you were talking about, the Alabama Crimson Tide, or Kevin, the Wisconsin Badgers. I mean, this is going to be really interesting to watch as we get closer and closer in.
Yeah, I've been glad to see that Alabama is one of the schools that really has wanted to play, because I'm firmly in that department. And I would be frustrated if, you know, I was, affiliated as I am alumni, or, you know, even hosting shows or whatever with a school that didn't want to play, you know, because you look at the numbers, and, you know, for the young people, they have a more of a threat to die from car accidents and lightning than they do from COVID, you know. So that it's the coaches and everyone else that's going to have to worry about the COVID, not the players, you know. And that's kind of what Nick Saban said yesterday. It looks like the SEC's pushing, and some schools, like, look at Nebraska. I thought that was interesting that Nebraska, Pete Ricketts is someone that I know. He's the governor. You know, he's behind the program, the AD, the coach, Scott Frost. They're all saying, hey, look, if the Big Ten doesn't want to play, that's them. That's their call. We'll go somewhere else. And then you got Greg Sankey, who's with the SEC, going, hey, we're going to keep our eyes open and see. So what an interesting year it could be to have. What if some of these other schools, like, kind of, instead of having this whole conference thing, the conferences, because of the political pressure that's put on the commissioners and stuff, don't want to have a season, but the schools do. If they break out and it's kind of just like a smaller group. The other thing too, and you were talking about the unionization of the players, and players have been this year have been making demands that I think some of them are pretty ridiculous. Just with all kind of stuff, political stuff that they're involved in. They want this and they want that. What if we got back to actually having college kids play athletics? I've felt like at the major schools that a lot of these kids that are in the different sports wouldn't even be in school if it wasn't for the sport. It's like, I was always friends with baseball players that were like, I'm not just talking about football, but I'm just saying whatever, like, hey, I'm here to play baseball. Draft's coming up. I'm not, once I get drafted, I'm done with this. I don't want to really be here. And I feel like football is kind of that on the next level because there's so much money involved in it, right? The recruiting and everything else. And then you watch like the schools without the scholarships. It's just a different game, right? I mean, it's not like a minor league for the NFL. Or college baseball has really turned into like a minor league for the minor league, like all these, half of the guys are gonna be drafted out of college. But, what if we had college sports that were actually, like I'm going to be a banker, but I'm going to play college sports too, like that's kind of been my attitude because I'm not a big fan of amateur athletes wanting to take advantage of their being amateurs, and at the same time they want to be professionals, right? So it's like if you want to be professional, then I feel like you should be able to go from high school right to the NFL, and their gripe should be with the NFL, who won't let them in there. You can go from high school to Major League Baseball. And if you want to go to college, part of college is getting a degree. It is to have a focus of study. In the sports, it's become the only thing that a lot of these guys are there for, when it should be part of what they're there for. And the big part of that too is, I can remember seeing some really great athletes like Tyrone Prothro, who was a receiver at Alabama, get hurt, and he would have been an excellent NFL player. He's a great player. Broke his leg in the game against Florida. And I'm going to say like 2006 maybe, and has trouble walking right now. He's probably my favorite Alabama player. And it's like, at least what lucky for him is that, hey, you know what, you get a degree and then you can go out and do something else. But he missed out on a lot of money because of that. He would. So I just feel like college is an amateur. It's supposed to be amateur. If these guys want to turn it into a professional thing, then they need to go do something else. Maybe make up their own league that's professional. But there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of this going on here with the college athlete over, this COVID and then everything else, all the political stuff.
Well, that's interesting. You raised the point because sort of lost in all the headlines is the fact that The Rock bought the XFL. And there's a solid business reason for it. Vince McMahon kind of bailed out early, and the XFL 3 is sort of positioned as a league to develop young players, as a springtime alternative to college football. Now, will big names quit college to play in the XFL? I have no idea, and I have no idea whether the NFL wants that or not. But as you talk about transitional leagues, something between where an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old now physically is versus where they need to be in the NFL. And the XFL may be the spot for that.
Yeah. I thought that was a good purchase too. I watched those games. Yeah, like I watched those games on television before COVID, and I thought this is going to work. And I know Vince McMahon had the big failure, way back in the day. And then the crazy thing was that they did everything right this time. And then we just got hit by COVID. The Rock might have just fallen into what could be a pretty good investment.
Yeah, definitely. And the XFL, worked best as a regional league. It worked best in the smaller markets. It failed in New York because MetLife in spring, whoa, boy, that's a big draw. But it worked in Orlando. You know,
St. Louis.
yeah, it worked in those secondary markets that where people still love their football, but they're willing to go to games year round. So we'll see if that league can develop as a feeder for the NFL. Maybe it will, but pro football, and I know you've seen this, Mick. Physically, it's just a whole lot different than college football. I mean,
Right.
the maturity, there's very few 18-year-olds, unlike professional baseball, who could walk in and play professional football, especially maybe some skill positions, but not as a lineman. You know,
Right.
I've seen that in our local high school. There was a highly recruited lineman, 6'6", enrolled at UW, which is lineman school. Couldn't play much his freshman year because he was not physically up to it as compared to the seniors. So he would never have been able to play pro football.
Yeah, I agree. You're 100% right, and that's what when they're putting these demands out, and you know, and wanting to take that amateur status away from themselves, they want to be, you know, treated like pro athletes. It's like you can't play in the NFL, but we shouldn't be able to stop them from trying. You know, because what if someone came along, and you're right, like the LeBron James could go straight from high school. He didn't need college, right?
Yeah.
It's tougher in the NFL. I mean, you have to be a man to go in there and play that game. But when you start putting out demands and you start saying, hey, this is what we want, and this is, you know, we're not going to do it. It's like, hey, look, if I'm the college president, I'm going to say, listen, that's fine. You go and be professional, and we would love to see you have success. But what we're doing here isn't that. You know, like that's not what we're here for. You know, we're here to provide you, and a lot of these guys get a free education. And trust me, for someone that has to pay for theirs every day, it's expensive. But the one great thing that we undervalue about education is that it's something that no one can ever take away from you. You know, you have it up here. And when you are educated, I grew up around a lot of people that didn't. My father was illiterate. I probably said that before. Like, he could barely write his name, you know, and it's like, just the decision making that you have, and the power of being able to walk into a room with anyone and be able to just communicate is priceless. You know, so I hate to see that for a lot of these young guys that might have grown up in a similar situation that I did, because, you know, someone's in their ear saying, hey, you know what, this is what you need to do. You know, there's other things that are valuable besides money. I know that's hard to believe, but education is more valuable than money, because as long as you're educated, you're always going to be able to figure out a way to make money and to you know, to support your family. You know, that's the game plan anyway. So I just hope that we keep amateur sports amateur, and these guys will kind of take advantage of the opportunities, instead of just like where it's like every time you turn around, it's like, we don't like this, we don't like that, we don't like this. Like, come on, man. It's been going for a long time. Been a pretty good deal for everybody for a long time. Should someone be able to sell their signature? Yes. And I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that, you know, this isn't about you going in there and, you know, and the school paying for you and you getting all this other stuff. Like, it's about the education too. That's as valuable as anything.
So basically, it should be more like college baseball.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seriously, you know, college baseball, you're there because you want to be there. If you need a year or two to physically get better, you can do JUCO. You can then turn pro, or you can play all 4 years and have a great time, and then go pro. So there's a lot more flexibility on the baseball front. Football, there's one track. That's it.
That said, I do think, okay, so it started with Kane Coulter with Northwestern, right? And now Trevor Lawrence is serving as a face. And we are looking at these college football programs that make $80 million, $90 million, $100 million. That if these college football programs lost 3, 4, 5 key players, then they suddenly would lose 2 or 3 more games a year. And it's so important to win. You can't be a Texas. And Texas makes so much money, but you've got to be an actual national championship contender. You can't be Michigan and lose to Ohio State every year. So I do think that we could be getting closer to, if the right players, and there's a lot of them, get together in an influential place, crossing colleges, crossing conferences. I think that with these extraordinary circumstances of coronavirus, we could see them coming together in the absence vacuum of power that is NCAA. Because NCAA at the very top has offered no real guidance, which has led each conference to say, we need to take care of ourselves right now. We need to figure out things for ourselves, because we're just not getting anything from the NCAA.
Well, the NCAA is pretty powerless when it comes to college football. And that's what people don't realize, is that the real power is with the FBS system and with the Power 5 conferences. That's an ESPN. That's the triumvirate. NCAA itself has less power than any of those three entities when it comes to football.
Yeah, and I mean, well, I'll say this, Jesse. Look, if those great players are, if they're that concerned about making the money, then they should go to the XFL. And maybe the XFL becomes like a really good league where it has great players. I would rather see those guys go to the XFL and be professionals and leave college amateur. Even though we know there's a lot of stuff that goes on in college behind the scenes that's not supposed to, that's against the rules, that would probably make a lot of these guys not amateur athletes. I would rather them go to an XFL. Maybe The Rock signs them all, and it's a really good brand. And college football has, more. They don't have those guys anymore, But this, I think the cream would still rise to the top. It just wouldn't be. Maybe it's not as good of a product as it was because you're losing some of the star players. People have been going to college football games since Yale and Harvard played in front of 100,000 people. I saw there's a picture of it, like from like 18 something or other, where there's 100,000 people at a football game, and there's those guys were amateurs, and it was still a great product. I feel like we're kind of getting away from, that was my whole point. We're getting away from what this should be. It's turned into something else. And maybe the XFL is that thing that gives those guys that want to make money and want to be professionals earlier than their bodies telling them that they can. They don't want to follow the rules that are set up from the NCAA. Well, they can go there and do that, and I think that would be cool. I mean, look, I'd watch it. I'd watch that, but I'm still always going to watch college football. I just don't want the players to turn it into the next NFL.
I'm curious with what we're seeing with Major League Baseball do during this time in terms of what they actually want to do toward minor league baseball and toward other areas, if we'll see the conferences do that exact same thing toward the NCAA. Say, this is the moment for us to actually take charge of ourselves. We don't need the NCAA.
At some point, that's the logical conclusion if they want to keep up their revenue structures.
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm looking at this whole Major League Baseball taking over minor league baseball thing. I don't know what to think. Not that I'm a big fan of the minor league baseball office, because honestly, I really don't even know what they ever did. Once in a while
exactly. That's like the conference's same relationship to the NCAA as you and your relationship to the minor league baseball offers. They're in charge, but do we need, that's the whole question that arose.
All right. Or is it going to be a situation where next year we're going to realize that they did a lot of stuff? I know that I've heard from some team presidents that they were unhappy with the amount of people that worked at the office, that they thought it was a lot of wasted money. That they could be a little bit political sometimes. Like, I don't know. And then obviously the relationship with Major League Baseball soured to the point where, we got to where we are right now. And I'm also hearing that maybe Major League Baseball's plan for the Appy League and the Pioneer League could be one that the teams really like after all, after all we're losing our affiliate, we'll see. I mean, like it's an unfinished book yet. I haven't got to the end of the story. So I'm curious, but you're right. Maybe, maybe the NCAA is like the next minor league baseball office.
which is what Major League Baseball would love. I mean, they've been sucking up to the NCAA now for 2 or 3 years, including moving the draft to Omaha and highlighting the College World Series and playing a professional game in Omaha. So that's been happening. From what I'm gathering, though, it's actually far less happening between Major League and Minor League Baseball right now than people are tweeting about.
Great. That's because Major League Baseball is now consumed by its season, right? Oh, there's baseball games.
Nature abhors a vacuum. And because there's a vacuum right now, everyone's rushing in with all the speculation. And I heard this third-hand crap. But there's far less happening. There's ideas floating around like there are always. But again, and we've talked about this every week, don't expect anything to happen until the current agreement ends at the end of September. And what term do you have for us today, Jesse?
All right, the term I've got, and by the way, here's to you, Fernando Tatis Jr., establishing yourself as a great star. Because we were wondering, all right, who's the next big star? He's pretty good.
Yep.
Term I've got for you today is pea patch. Let's go to that great Red Barber term where if hitters are doing well, they're tearing up the pea patch. A pea patch is a baseball field. So proposed pea patch in Knoxville, the upgraded pea patch in Buffalo, New York.
That's a good term. Broadcasters like Mick should be using that all the time.
I like those old terms like that. I've never used pea patch, but it's when I hear it, I always think of Red Barber because I've read all of his books, and I remember listening to some of the vintage games that he's broadcast, and it's an old country term, obviously. Because there's a lot of people these days that probably wouldn't even know what a pea patch was. But, back then, I mean, everyone had their own little farm in the backyard and, maybe grew up in a farm town. America was a smaller place, even in the cities.
Found Pea Patch Island and looking it up, looking at pictures of pea patches. There's so many great country terms when it comes to describing fields because you can see the fields in the country. So you could call the outfield the pasture. Or for a while there, the infield grass was called the inner garden, and the outfield grass was called the outer garden.
So who was the last broadcaster to really make use of that kind of language? Was it Ernie Harwell, or has anyone since been at all close to it?
It's got to be Ernie. And it's just because he was around for so long. He lived almost to 100 years old, and, I mean, he was broadcasting pretty late into his life. And still excellent to listen to. Yeah, excellent broadcaster.
And started out in the South, so he had that little twang going.
The Atlanta Crackers.
Yeah. Ernie's from Georgia. Red Barber was from Florida. There aren't too many broadcasters now. What made Vin Scully stand out was he was poetic. He loved reading poetry, and he would describe the game in a poetic way, about all eyes upon Sandy Koufax at the center of the field, all of the different ways that he would call it. It was more that he was writing poetry about it than actually calling the baseball game, here's the pitch, that kind of thing. So I think that whole question, Mick, I don't know if anybody comes to your mind. But when I think about broadcasters right now, nobody's a poet. Nobody is saying, let me think of colorful expressions to really bring these to life.
Skip here, throw in a few phrases. That may be the last one.
I'd say John Miller is to me, the last just superstar radio broadcaster, and I listen to them, the Giants now, and I think they have one of the best broadcasts on TV and radio, by the way. And then at the end of the game, they have this thing where the TV and radio guys all get together, and it's the last segment on the post game wrap, and they just go around the room. It reminds me of like driving home from an Orioles game as a kid, and my dad and my best friend and whoever else all just like reliving the game together. It's the best segment on radio. I wrote about this on Facebook a couple weeks ago. I was at Wrigley Field maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and Croup came out of the booth and grabbed a drink, and I was getting a drink too at the little Wrigley Field press box kitchen. And I said, hey, I'm a huge fan of the post-game rap. And he says, well, come on in here. And I go in and I say, it's a little tiny booth. If you ever been to Wrigley Field, they slant down. There's like a spot up top for really for the equipment and the engineer, and then down low are the broadcasters, and then these steps, right? So there's, Krupke, Fleming, and John Miller, and the engineer, and me. And we are crammed in there, and they're going around the room talking about that night's game. And I thought, this is one of the best memories for me, because I had listened to it so many times on the radio. I'm not even as a Giants fan, just a fan of the broadcast. But when you listen to John Miller do a game, and there's other great broadcasters too, don't get me wrong, but when you listen to him do a game, it's amazing his ability to throw in so much descriptive language. I mean, I marvel at it. It's a style that he has, and I try to do some of that myself, where he can talk about 3 or 4 different things going on, minute details about whatever it is. You close your eyes and you can see it. I've tried so hard to emulate that style myself, but I just think that of the guys that are left, and it's not really the country sayings, because he's from the Bay Area where he is right now in the Giants. But I just think that he's just the best at the art of doing the play-by-play right now.
See, I view him and Vin sort of as examples of your urbane broadcaster, very coastal, either east or west.
Mm-hmm.
They don't yell. They don't need to yell. They make their points, and they don't assume that their listeners are stupid. And I think there are some major league broadcasters who assume their listeners are stupid. I'm not going to name names.
There's a rise of a different broadcaster type, though. And I would argue that's the pop culture type. So I'm going to spotlight Jason Benetti. If it's going on in pop culture, if it's music, if it's movie, whatever it might be, and we're talking 80s, 90s, Jason Benetti knows it, he can reference it, he can quote it, and he's daring you to keep up with his pop culture knowledge.
He's been great this year. Have you caught any White Sox games? They'll cut to players in the stands during a game, and they don't give him crap, but they'll josh with him a little bit on the air. And of course, Steve Stone never joshes with anyone, so it's sort of fun to hear Jason go at it. Although he's been marvelously entertaining this year. One of the breakout broadcasters of this year, I think.
Yeah, I think he's fantastic. I mean, I'm not a big White Sox watcher, but I like his voice. I like his style. I think it's not my style. I'm more folksy, play-by-play guy. So I have very, very different styles of doing it, but he's become one of the real stars. And I mean, with the disability that he has, I mean, he's such an inspiration for anyone that has a disability to look to him, because it's never been an excuse for him. But you look at it and it's like, he just rocks it. He's got to be one of the best of the young play-by-play guys. I'd say him and Adam Amin are my two, top young play-by-play guys. Love both. Love watch if they're on and I got to watch and they're on doing a game. I love it. I catch Adam. They're both from Chicago, by the way, which is ironic. But both excellent play-by-play guys. And there's some young guys that are kind of coming into the business now, but that are different. It's not like John Miller and it's not like Vince Scully, but it's really good.
It's really smart, very smart broadcasting.
Yeah. And I think Len Casper, I mean, I've worked with him for a long time. That's the thing that I've always marveled about working with Len, is that he's so smart. You're just constantly thinking, and then he'll drop an Andy Griffith reference in on you, and which I love Andy. So, and he's funny, he's one of my favorites too. But it's because of the intelligence, and the fact that Len never makes a mistake, which I don't know how he does that, but I make mistakes.
And on that note, Nick Gillispie, any final thoughts?
Hey guys, it's great to talk to you. Always is. It kind of feels normal when we get on here and chat. A lot going on in the world, but it's fun to get on here and talk and share our opinions. And I hope everyone has a great week.
Kevin Reichard, final thoughts.
Absolutely the same feeling. This is the highlight of my work week by far. So on that note, I will say goodbye and already start looking forward to next week.
All right. Here's to our 2 rookie Orioles broadcasters, Jeff Arnold, Melanie Newman. Congratulations, Melanie, becoming the Orioles' first female play-by-play broadcaster. All right, that'll do it. For Mick, for Kevin, I'm Jesse. This has been the Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat.